Welcome, Vusi Maseko. You left my audience burning last time. Hey, listen.
Did I?
Hey,
Did I?
everyone was
Did
like,
I?
who is this guy?
Did I?
You know, and we really appreciate you. We appreciate what you carry in you. We appreciate the knowledge that you bring for us. So
Thank
to
you,
learn,
thank
you know,
you.
because in most cases we see men and we think that they are the same, but you being so different really gives us hope to remain in trusting God that people are really different and men aren't all treasures. You know what I mean? So we are going to continue from where we left with the importance of setting boundaries. I know previously you had a conversation with Emin Mayeko and you were
Yes.
talking about the damages of or the consequences of being in a relationship that is outside God's covenant.
Yeah.
So you're just going to talk about something that is more or less similar, but it's the importance of setting boundaries, you know. And I think if you were listening that I had
Yes,
mentioned of my experiences with not setting boundaries or with setting boundaries and not implementing them, you know, and how important is that in a male perspective to have boundaries and to set onto them.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. How was your trip?
My trip to to Dubai and Paris.
I don't know which one you
You
took
and
first.
Amen.
Yeah, Dubai.
I've
I
been
went
good.
to
I've been
Paris.
resting. I've been good. I've been resting.
Yeah, maybe on my side as well, we do appreciate what you do, and we pray that people get the message behind all the efforts and the work that are put into this project, you know, and we pray that God blesses you and enlarge your territory.
Thank you.
Yeah, so setting boundaries, setting boundaries, it's one of the most difficult thing to set boundaries, but it's very important because that's where you draw the line about what you can take in and what you can take out. If you don't set boundaries from the word go, you do not know or you do not communicate how people should treat you or how you want to be treated. As hard as it is, but I think it's very critical that we do set boundaries. Not all boundaries are bad. Some boundaries, they can still be good boundaries. To say, this is where you stop, this is where you come. Yeah.
And they're very hard, I might say.
Yeah.
They're very hard to attain to.
That's correct.
That's why we always need God to
Yeah.
give us strength to continue with them. Have you also been in an experience where you felt like you needed to compromise your boundaries to make the next person feel comfortable or to be in a relationship, and maybe because you felt like it's been long that you've been single and then you feel like now I need a partner, you know, and you then now get into a space where you just feel like it's been so long that I feel like I'm ready.
Yeah.
And even though you know that, even though you are ready, but it's not with the right person. Have you been in that place?
Yeah, so obviously we live in a real world, and I'm not gonna act like I'm all angelic and whatnot, but there are principles, and that I said this is not a no-go area. Well, obviously, as a male person, you have needs as a man, and you have the other person who also has needs to say, okay, fine, these are my boundaries, and we cannot cross this line. But I'm willing to meet you here. You are compromising on your side so that you also compromise on the side. Boundaries are set, but you know that we're not going to go on the other side of the boundaries. Because remember, you're also not in a relationship alone. This other person has needs. The only problem, or what I see in most cases, is that most of us, we have uncommunicated boundaries. It's more like the silent boundaries, that they are there, but the next person doesn't know about those boundaries. For instance, you say, as Vusi said, no sex before marriage. But you find this beautiful lady. You don't communicate that beforehand. You drag umntwana abantu who is familiar or who used to do sex before marriage. To them, it's just a norm. You know, it's something that they do on a daily basis. But if you don't communicate that with them, you have robbed them of their choices to say, okay, fine, this guy has these certain boundaries and he doesn't do 1, 2, 3. Right. Can I therefore be in a relationship with this person? But if you feel like you don't want to be in that relationship, give them the opportunity to make choice based on their own boundaries as well, because everybody has boundaries. Not only you have boundaries. Some boundaries are healthy, some they are unhealthy. Some people don't even have boundaries to start with, and there's nothing bad with that one, because we look at people who doesn't have boundaries as they're loose or whatnot. Some people had boundaries before they got banned. Some people had boundaries before and they felt like, oh, my boundaries didn't work out for me. I lost a man. I lost a girlfriend because of those boundaries.
Come on.
At the end
Come
of
on,
the day,
preach.
they're just like, you know what? These boundaries, they must go. Yeah.
You are preaching. Hey, you are preaching. You are living. Hey, listen. He's dropping. Listen, when you say that there's healthy boundaries and there's unhealthy boundaries, when do we get to say that this is an unhealthy boundary?
I'm just going to use one simple example. If you say this is a health boundary, is that I don't want to sleep with you now because I'm saving you for marriage. That's what I will look as a healthy boundary, because both of you are going to benefit. And health, I'm just going to use this simple example for both sides so that I can bring the balance. Now, you know that this is her boundary. The woman doesn't want to sleep before marriage. You let her break her boundary, sleep with her, and you still go. That's unhealthy, because you knew exactly that these are her boundaries, and you drag her into believing that even if I sleep with you, I'm still gonna stay.
I'll still marry you.
I'll still marry you.
Yeah, and they do that.
And they break their boundary on the other side, and then you still go. That's unhealthy. Do you get my point?
Yeah.
And healthy one is when both sides will benefit. And health is when one side will benefit at the expense of the other one. So that's why it's very important to guard your boundaries. To say, I've set these boundaries for a certain reason. I need to protect them. They're not just there just to say, oh no, these are my boundaries. You must know that I don't date the guy who drinks. I don't maintain them. It's very important that you keep them maintaining, because they're not just there just to decorate. Oh, look, I've got 12 boundaries. I don't do this, I don't do this. But when it comes for you to apply the same thing, you don't apply that. You know, you just let people walk over you. There is a situation wherein you say, let's use a simple example. You work at the spa. You know how disrespectful customers are. We go there, we just talk to these people anyway, anyhow. But if you are the customer, you know they say that the customer is always right.
Yeah.
But if you set your boundaries to say, I'm not going to allow anybody else to talk to me anyhow, those, you're not crossing this line. You within your rights to say, excuse me, ma'am, this is not how you speak to people. When you speak to people, address them with respect. Those are your boundaries. So you don't let anybody else talk to you anyhow. You tell them that if you want to talk to me, speak to me as an adult. Address me politely, with respect, so that they know. Because we let people just do anything as they please with us. You understand? So, but if you set those the boundaries, they're everywhere. There's relationship boundaries. There's family boundaries. For instance, if I can give you the family boundaries to say, family, I earn 5,000. I'm gonna give you 1,000 rand. That's my boundary that I'm gonna give you. Don't come and say you want 2,500 because you are exceeding my limit. So you just have to put a limit. For instance, if you're driving behind somebody in a car, you know that you have to have a certain boundary in between the car. That should anything happen when you're driving towards that particular person, you can able to either sway the side or do a side. That's a boundary that you set between the people so that they don't really come to your space. For instance, if you are maybe driving, I don't know if you've observed that people of BMW, forgive me, BMW, they drive as if, you know, they own that thing. And then if you don't really set boundaries in between to say, okay, fine, let them pass so that you have this respect, because they will drive right behind you, to get my point. And then it puts you under pressure. So if you apply that in life, if somebody, you set these boundaries, you're saying, you're not crossing this line, but they come too closer to that, they might compromise your boundaries.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I need a cold water, please.
Why
I
cold
feel like
water
it's just
now?
too hot in this place, and
Not
like I need a
really.
cold water. Wow. All right. So we what about a person who's very fearful of setting boundaries, Vusi? Because I've been at that point, honestly, where I just feel like, but if I have these boundaries, nobody's gonna be with me. And with having to be in an environment where people grow up without boundaries and people get into relationships without boundaries, they don't really understand. Oh, wow, thank you. I really needed a cold water. Thank you. You know, um, what about someone who's very fearful
Yeah.
of setting the boundaries because they don't want to be alone?
Yeah.
They're fearful because they feel like their family is not going to love them back. You know, they're not going to like them anymore. They feel like they have too much of standards. Because I've been at a point where I've been told that I have ridiculous standards. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
True.
And I think at that time I was very adamant that I'm not going to break them for anybody
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And no matter how much people told me that, I still was very adamant that I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But for somebody who's just setting the new boundaries and they're very new into this,
Yeah.
you know, how then do we say it? And they're very fearful of setting them.
Yeah.
You know, so what then do we say to a person who's very fearful of losing people
Yeah.
at the cost of setting her boundaries?
That's true. And it does happen that, because people have different experiences. You dated this guy before, and he said, if you don't sleep with me, I'm going to leave. And they left. That was a boundary that you set then. You now move into the next relationship and you find Vusi. Now you are fearful of losing Vusi because you don't want to lose Vusi like you lose that person. You automatically destroy all your boundaries. You
Yes,
don't
guys.
have boundaries at all because now of your previous experience that has happened. It's also important to understand where people are coming from. It's just that we're not genuine these days. We're not genuine about anything. If you tell me your boundaries, I'm going to use that against you. I'm going to use anything that you tell me
Do it.
against me to say, okay, you left because they didn't want to sleep with you. Okay, I'm also going to leave. And then I use that. And you don't want to go through the same thing again
Wow.
because, you experience this. You know what is it to belong in. But what I can say is that a good person who has good intentions, if you put or you set your boundaries, they will respect that. If somebody comes in your life and you set the simple boundaries to say, at home, I need to be 8 at home. Like, those are your standards at home because you still stay at home. I'm just going to use that as an example. But they don't want to respect that. They want to break that. The simplest thing as that. Now, how would you trust this person with the bigger boundaries? Because the Bible says, be faithful with small things so that you can be trusted with more. So we fail with the simple boundary that I want to cross this. But she told me to say, take me home 8 o'clock every day. No, but can we
okay.
chill a little bit? I'll take you home at 10. Because I have my own agendas that I know that maybe sometimes I will just try my luck and say it's late, sleep over. All of those things. So I think it's very important to make your boundaries, maintain them, keep them, protect them. Because it's not only ends in making them.
Can we make your boundaries,
Yeah.
keep your boundaries,
Yeah.
protect your boundaries?
Yes. Yeah. Because they are yours.
Wow.
You're the one that said. And the next person doesn't know about your boundaries up until you communicate them. Very important. You need to tell the next person to say, these are my boundaries. It's more like you're setting your own rule, but you are allowing somebody else to fit into that. To say, yes, you've been hurt before, but these are my boundaries. I don't do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. But communicate. It's very, very critical to communicate your boundaries to the next person so that you give them the fair chance as well to be able to say, yes, I'm going to choose to stay with your ridiculous boundaries, if they call that, because there are some boundaries that are so ridiculous, but be in a position that you are able to maintain them. And don't set boundaries for the sake of you setting boundaries. Let there be the reason why you're doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of
Yeah.
you setting boundaries.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just going to change this whole thing to
Yeah.
the purpose of setting
Yeah.
boundaries. Because,
why
wow.
why do you set boundaries? Have you been hurt before? Were you disappointed before? why you want to have so many boundaries, because people put fences around them because of the previous experience. That's why I said it's very important that we understand where people are coming from. Because some of the people are just setting boundaries just for setting boundaries, but some people got real reason why they're setting those boundaries. Yeah.
Again, we are going to have a drink.
Yeah.
Wow. Make boundaries, keep the boundaries, protect the boundaries.
Yeah.
It's 3 things.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. And it's so important, actually, to
That's
have the boundaries and to keep them. I think in one of those things, as you've mentioned, that we protect, we have people have experience of why they have certain boundaries. You know what I mean? I think with also let your experience to be the one that pushes you to have boundaries. It's also one of the good things, that you don't want to be in the same pit that you were before, because
yes.
you know better and you experience better, and you let the experience that you had to protect you from getting into what you've also had. So it's like you can't keep repeating the same mistakes again. You know better, you've learned better, you've experienced better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Therefore, keep the boundaries, you know what I mean? And I think also one of the things I would urge is that do not change your boundaries to accommodate anybody else, because
Very
that's just one
important.
of the things that we get to do when we feel like we are so lonely, that we've been single for a long time, that we feel like people are moving on with their lives, people are getting married, you know what I mean? You are not in any competition with anybody, you know what I mean? And God has never put you in any competition with anybody to say that, all right, so this is going to get married and that person, and then you must be in a race as well to want to get married, you know what I mean, and eliminate your boundaries. So it's very important to carry the boundaries, because they help they help you to make better choices, you know what I mean? I think with what I'm saying this is, I realize also that I always say, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on Power and Purpose, that when I did not have boundaries, I attracted the same man like my father. And my father was not, my mom dated my father without boundaries, you know what I mean? And the previous while, my grandmother dated my grandfather without boundaries, you know what I mean? And now it's like a generation of same different men, you know what? So you date the same man like your father, because you never had to change the boundaries, you know, you never had to break the cycle, you know what I mean? So be in a position where you get to say that my mother has done it, but I'm going to do it differently. I've done it before, but I'm going to do it differently, you know what I mean? And also, it's one of the things that I always get, and I'd say that with where I'm at this moment, they really don't move me anymore. But before, they used to get through to me when people will be like, oh, but you have a child, and why are you doing this? You know, because you already have a child, you know what I mean? But having to know the importance of it right now, and to say that I'm not going to do what I did, I'm going to make it right this time. I'm going to correct the mistake that I've done, and this time I'm going to do it with God. And this time I'm going to have boundaries that God has created for me, so that I can be protected and that I can break the cycle. So also be aware that you have the key to break the cycle of what has happened previously, to break it so that it does not continue to happen in your family. Be the first one to, if it means so. Be the first one to bring the change, if it means so. Because right now you're carrying the key, and the key that you have been given by God, you know what I mean? And it has boundaries. So not everybody can have access to the key. Not everybody can have access to you, because you're different, you've grown. So don't let your past define your boundaries. Just because you are at a position, maybe. I've also had people where like, but I have boundaries, but I just feel like I'm just too broke to maintain the boundaries. You know, do not let money define your boundaries, because you definitely are going to lose it. You know what I mean? Do not let the situation, the circumstance that you're in, to define your boundaries, because honestly speaking, this is, at the end of the day, this is for God and not us.
That's true.
You know what I mean? He knew. And I there's a verse in the Bible that says that sexual sin is a sin against yourself. So you're sinning against your own body. You know what I mean? So imagine how it is when somebody steals your thing. But imagine if you steal something yourself, you steal from your own cup. You know what I mean? So it's very important to have boundaries. Like he said, have boundaries, maintain them and keep them and protect them as well. You know, no matter what people may say that those are ridiculous boundaries, but you know them is the most important part of having the ridiculous boundaries.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if maybe we have had this line that says, I'm going to push boundaries. So what people will say automatically say when they say they're pushing the boundaries, that they know that you have the boundaries. So they were going to always try to their luck to say, let me just test the waters. I know that she has boundaries. I'm just going to test the waters, see if maybe she able to compromise the boundaries. Not that they're not aware that you have boundaries. They are aware and they're very calculative into that. They know that what they will do to break into that circle or to break through your boundaries, because the boundaries are there to protect something else. They're not just there to say, I've got the boundary. You put the boundary to say, I'm putting this boundary here so that anybody who reaches me must be in this level. You can't want to have a boundary and there is no standards to your boundaries. For instance, when you say that you want to date, I need to date a guy that's golden. That's maybe the boundary that you're putting out there. However, if you find any guy that was not golden, do not go down to break that boundary. Because if you break that boundary, then he's going to access everything that you're trying to protect.
Exactly.
A boundary is more like a fence in a house. That it's more like protecting that. I understand. To say for you to be able to access 1, 2, 3, you need to get through the gate. And then you get through the gate in the right way, in the correct way. You know, you follow correct procedures. Do not let anybody else just push your boundary in here because of they trying their line. You know, so because they're very aware that Vusi has boundaries, and they will throw in suggestions like, let's do this, just to see if your boundaries will stand. But if you taking, your boundaries are gone.
You must not take a when you have boundaries.
No,
you must
stand firm to say, this I'm not doing.
Yeah.
This, you can't cross this line. Once you cross this line, you are crossing my territory. You understand? You can cross this line, but there are terms and conditions that need to be applied, and you need to follow those procedures. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. They like break the rules so that you can get the partner. And then you get the partner, then you're like, but this is not even worth breaking the rule for.
Breaking the rule for, yeah.
Yo, dude, like, it's very important to be wise and to get into relationships with so much wisdom, because the saddest thing about not having the boundaries is that eventually it ends in tears.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it ends in tears because you never protected what was supposed to have been protected.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's so important to be so wise enough to understand what is the whole purpose of me getting into the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think from understanding the whole purpose of you getting into the relationship, you're going to be able to have the boundaries that if my purpose is this, then it means that I must be this and do this, and you know what I mean? And I think also with having boundaries, that it's also important to have boundaries that you also are able to live by.
That's true.
And I mean
true.
that you can't expect to have a godly man when you are not a godly woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think one of the greatest things that I really do appreciate in having a relationship with God is the conviction that he brings into my life.
Yeah.
That I remember at one point before I stopped drinking, and I was like, I don't want a man who drinks, but God was like, but you drink. So how is it that you go into want somebody who drinks and then you don't drink, but you drink? So for me to bring that person, how are you? So it's always important to check yourself on, if I have this boundary, then how am I? If you are going to say that I want a person who's healthy, have you healed enough? Are you healing yourself? Are you in the process of healing yourself? You know what I mean? Look at yourself and see yourself. Where can I improve? Am I deserving this? And am I deserving this because I'm also working towards it? So you want what you are. So you can't be a broken person and be like, I want somebody who's healthy.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? So important that you have to work on yourself. Self-work is so important. I always encourage people on this channel that you have to have the ability to work on yourself, and it's an everyday work. It's not I worked on myself today and then 3 months later you're like, I better stop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like an everyday thing. It becomes a lifestyle that I
Lifestyle.
need to check on myself. God, where can I improve? How can I be a better person? You know what I mean? And I think it's so, like, with setting boundaries as well, you have to grow in such a way that you also understand and you know yourself and you work on yourself as well. You know what I mean?
That's so true.
So yeah, man. Wow, I did not even say.
Time flies when you're
Well,
having
time
fun.
flies when you're
So
having
they
fun.
say,
We
yeah.
are just gonna close it up with just few words. What is it that you would like to just say on our wrap up?
All right, the ways that I'm living with you, beautiful people, is that when you have boundaries, it's very important to communicate your boundaries on the word go. Because most of us, we have boundaries, but we do not communicate with them. And the next person comes into your life and said, I thought you do this because automatically, because I'm thinking we're dating, and then for it means that we can maybe have sex, for
Yes.
instance. But you didn't communicate your boundaries to this particular person. So it's very, very important that let's communicate these boundaries. Let the next person knows, because the boundaries are not there as a bad thing to the next person. And the next person, when also comes with their boundaries as well, respect the boundaries of the other person, because you want your boundaries to be respected. So respect other people's boundaries as well.
I think in one of the things that just happened, like a few months ago, actually,
Yeah.
with what you're saying, I got into this relationship. So I have this thing of getting into.
In and out.
Like, that once, I always say that I get into a relationship once a year, and
Yeah.
then if it's still working out, that's it. But that's it. So I get into this relationship with this guy, and he sends me, and I communicated with him my boundaries. I'm like, this is where my boundaries are, you know what I mean? And it's like, listen, I respect you, I mean, I put me in nkulunkulu, we
We're
are
good
one,
together.
you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
And it was going good,
Yeah.
and he sent me, then later on he sent me this what's this word, like it's not like a porn, but it's like a explicit,
Yeah.
is it explicit picture?
Yeah.
And I was like, first of all, I have to protect my mindset, so if I'm going to get this, that it means that the person is not on the same page with me.
Yeah.
And it was a quicker sign for me to say that this is not where I want to be.
That's true.
And I literally ended the relationship on that picture.
Yeah.
And he was like, I understand,
Yeah.
I understand what you said, because I was really going to find it so hard to end to be, and I was like, listen, if you are able to send those things at an
Yeah.
early stage of the relationship, so you can imagine because he was not even working in South Africa, but he was here for full few times. So I'm like, imagine when you're overseas, how are you going to work on that? You know what I mean? How am I going to trust you? You know
That's
what I mean?
true.
Because I already can see that you're not able to protect me. You're not able to protect my mindset and my decisions that I've made
Yeah.
by you sending this kind of things, And that's when I had to end things that I feel like we're not going the same direction. And as much as it hurt, but it had to be done.
That's
You
true.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
It had to be done because I had to protect where I'm going. I had to protect what God has revealed to me of what's going to come in my life, and I couldn't really compromise it with this,
Yeah.
So it came at a point where I was very adamant with the choices that I've made, and I was no longer the person that would sacrifice my boundaries to make the next person feel accommodated, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I'm really trying to tell the viewers that if it has to be done, let it be done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're going to see the whole purpose and the whole reason of why it was so important for you to let go of that relationship.
That's true.
If it's going to come in between the person that you are becoming, then it's still better that
Yeah.
you let it go and don't be afraid. I think as well with me, what I found easier was the fact that I was not afraid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, when you get into a relationship and you've been single, people don't even believe that you're going to attain into the relationship because you've been single and you know what I mean? You have not been.
yo.
So they're like, oh, wow, you just got into a relationship. When not in a few months you'd be out. And now you start being so scared of going back and saying that it did not end well because you're like, they told me, But it was one of the things that I had to be very selfish of myself and say that this is he has crossed the line,
Yeah.
and it's very important that I just leave it now, because along the way, if this person can protect me right now as well,
Yeah.
think about it, that if a guy cannot protect your boundaries, and sexual boundaries actually, if they can't protect them when they're in a relationship with you for like a year, imagine if you were to be sick. What's going to happen with you? What's going to
They'll
their
leave
marriage
you.
is over. You know what I mean? It means that the marriage is over. So I think that it's just important to protect the boundaries that you that you get to give. No, you can give it to him. It's fine. All right.
Yeah.
So I feel that it's so very important to protect the boundaries that
Yeah.
you keep, and not be afraid, be fearless of the boundaries that you keep, because they are for you,
That's
and
true.
not to destroy you, but to build you up, and so
Yeah.
that you can be a better person, and to be very selective of the right people that should be in your life.
That's
you know
true.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Because
So
remember, you're not only setting these boundaries for just the fun of it. There is something that you're protecting. To say, it's more like you got like a cheese. You say, don't cross this line, because you know that if you cross that line, my cheese will be spoiled or will be stolen or whatnot. But you try to make sure.
Please do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you try by all means to protect that. You don't set boundaries for. They're very hard to set boundaries, like I said before. But there's a way of making them not look so bad is communicating and respect your own boundaries, because you can't want somebody else to respect your boundaries, whereas you don't respect your boundaries. You understand? Yeah. So I think it's in along those lines. To
I
say,
think. Sorry.
Yeah.
you can
No. Go
continue.
ahead.
sorry. I think actually what you're saying when you say respect your boundaries,
Yeah.
I remember there was a time when I started having boundaries as well. The first thing I was very scared of is, if I break my own boundaries, then
Yeah.
I can't expect the next person to respect them.
To respect them.
You know what I mean? If I don't respect
Yeah.
them. But another thing, it was one of those things that where God was like, can I trust you with the decisions that you make?
You've made yourself, because
I trust
when
you?
you make those boundaries, it's you who set
Phew.
alone by yourself,
That's-
without me even knowing your boundaries, because you sit down, you said, Lord, these are my boundaries, these are my boundaries. You seal that by yourself. When the next person comes, they don't know your boundaries. You need to communicate those boundaries to them so that they can able to know them. But if you don't communicate them,
Right?
they don't know about
And
those boundaries.
can God trust you
Yeah.
with what He has assigned you to do? Can God trust you? And I think one of the hardest things is having to disappoint God. I'm like, no, I can't miss this. I can't disappoint God. You know what I mean? So it's
It's a beautiful story that Joseph had said. When Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with Joseph, Joseph was not concerned about Potiphar. He was concerned about what God will say about me. So even if you set your boundaries, be concerned about, yes, I've set the boundaries, but what would God says about me if I break these boundaries? Not you, not my friends, but what would God? Because you set the boundaries, say, I don't want to sleep with any man before sex. That's you, right? And then, but if you break that boundaries, what will God say about you after you broke those boundaries?
wow.
Yeah.
What will God say about you?
Yeah.
Can God trust you in the promises that He has made for you? Can
Yeah.
God trust you with the assignment that He has assigned you?
Yeah.
I think we're just not even going to end. Like, we're just going to be prayer because the Holy Spirit is doing the work right now. Do you still want to close it up? Are you done?
Yeah,
Are we closing
have
up?
done.
All right.
We'll close it up.
Cool.
Boundaries. People,
I think
keep them.
Yeah.
Protect them.
Protect them.
Yeah.
Make them,
Yeah.
keep them, protect them.
Yeah.
We are living with those three.
Yeah.
Make them, keep them, protect them.
That's true.
Yes. And
Yeah.
guide them.
Guide them,
So we're just gonna leave it at this, guys. You know what we do. This is on Power and Purpose. We get
Power
deep,
and
honey.
Purpose.
We get so deep, and it is just all for you. And we thank you for tuning in onto On Power and Purpose. And this is your girl Rene, and this is
Vusi.
Vusi maseko.
Vusi
Vusi
maseko.
Shoni maseko. And we really do appreciate you. So bye.